Hi everyone. I'm Mateo and I like to draw. I wouldn't normally be doing this, but my sister Izzy has challenged me to share my art or something. Anyway, in these videos, I will show you how I draw some stuff, and hopefully it will inspire you to do the same. You can draw along if you feel like it, so get a pencil out or something. This is Draw with Mateo. On my first night of being an Aware Dreamer, Izzy and I went to the fantasy realm. It's this really awesome place full of fairies, unicorns, and green deer. Why are the deer green? I'm not really sure. All I can say is, it's the dream world. So today, I thought we could draw the fantasy realm. Before the Nightmare King corrupted it, of course. Sound good? Along the way, we can talk about how to separate the foreground, middle ground, and background in a picture. Let's start by drawing a tree in the foreground. I'm going to just sketch in a rough shape for the roots and trunk. The fantasy realm is covered in trees, and their leaves are always colored as if it was the middle of autumn. It's really cool. Even better than Central Park in October. Speaking of leaves, as we draw the treetop, we should try to keep in mind how overlapping things can create depth and make it look like some things are closer than others. It goes along with the whole foreground, background thing. We can add some grass and overlap the root of the tree a little bit. Then maybe draw some lines to show which way the roots and trunk are turning. Fantasy realm trees are a bit different than waking world trees, so we can make this one look like the trunk is kind of turning into itself. That looks kind of cool. Now let's focus on the right side of the page. I think I'll add some roots and draw another tree. And while it kind of just makes sense to draw trees in the fantasy realm, they also are tools that we can use to create a frame for our middle ground and background. We'll have one tree on either side of the page, and what we put in between those trees will be our middle ground and background. I think we should fill out some of the roots a bit more. Maybe add some more grass? If we add a little grass on top, in front, and behind the roots, then it helps us to continue to create that feeling of depth. When I was first learning how to draw a landscape in art class, that was the one thing that my teacher kept repeating. Depth, depth, depth. In a way, it helps a 2D picture almost look a little 3D. So let's be sure to keep overlapping things, and maybe add some more lines to the roots and trunk of this tree, like we did for the other one. Another cool technique, I guess you could call it, is to use floaters. Remember that we are in the dream world, which means some things are a little more mystical than in the waking world. So we have the big leafy treetop area here, and around it we can put smaller leaf shapes that are floating just off the surface. I use floaters a lot when drawing my comics. They add some nice detail. Okay, so that's the foreground. Now we can start working on the middle ground by drawing some diagonals. Well, maybe not that high. Hang on. Okay, cool. That's better. Now, I bet you can't guess what we're gonna draw next. Yeah, that's right, another tree. But this one is going to be a little bit smaller because we want it to look further away. And it'll be resting on a floating rock. When drawing landscapes, I try to keep a reminder in the back of my head to vary the size of things so that we have a little bit of contrast. That's why I drew these 3 smaller rocks under the big one. Let's finish working on the tree itself now. So we need a couple more roots that come down and hug the rock as tightly as Izzy holds Bunchu. Then we can continue building up the trunk and branches, and give this one a nice leafy top as well. Now I'm only going to sketch the treetop until I reach the edge of the leaves of the first tree we drew. This will make it look like that tree is in front of this new one. And then we'll add some more directional lines to the tree, but I'm sure you probably could have guessed that already. I'm going to use some hatching, which is similar to shading but not quite the same thing. And that might help us understand where the light is coming from in this environment, because the hatching basically acts as shadows. We have to keep filling in the middle ground, so let's make another tree. This one can be rooted to the ground, and maybe have some rocks to the side of it. I'm not pressing too hard on the pencil, so that if I make a mistake, I can easily erase it. There's that confidence we're looking for. So yeah, I only push hard on the pencil after everything is sketched out, and I'm a bit more sure that I won't need to change it later. I think I'm going to layer the treetop a little bit, like there are a bunch more leaves facing away from us. Okay, let's take a break from drawing trees for just a moment and make a couple more hills, all overlapping each other and behind the trees we drew. And we'll drop a small tree in here just for an accent. Why not? It'll be floating on a rock too. I don't really know if the rocks are what make the trees float, but I will say I've never seen a tree floating in the fantasy realm that wasn't holding a big boulder. We've basically gotten to the background now, so we can create the tree line of the forest with some broad strokes across the page. I'll drop in another small tree back here without putting too much detail into it because it's so far away. And then make some big cloud shapes behind it to fill in most of the remaining sky. Oh, this will be fun. Let's draw another dream realm off in the distance. Maybe Pillow's Peak. That was one of the first few realms me and my friends traveled to, and we met the nicest dream creature, Jim. Oh, it's probably best if you don't bring up Jim around Izzy. He was struck by one of the Night Hunter's bolts and... yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and add a couple more clouds that kind of surround Pillow's Peak. There! Now that everything is basically sketched out, we can start separating the foreground, middle ground, and background by using values. That is basically another word for light and dark. We can put light things next to dark things in order to make it easier to see everything. Notice how it all kind of blends together right now? That's because everything is light, so we can go back and change it up a little. We'll do this by using hatching. Remember how we did that with the rock? It's the same thing here. We can make this foreground tree a little darker by hatching the leaves. Maybe even add some more lines to the trunk as well. I think I'll add some more directional lines to the tree on the right too. Since the foreground is darker, we can keep the middle ground lighter, as if the sun was shining on it. The background we can put in shadow, now using our hatching. Nope, that was too heavy. Okay, more like that. It's darker than the middle ground, but not too dark. We can do this for the entire tree line. This makes it easier for people to immediately be able to separate the trees in the middle ground from those in the background when they look at our work. It's an easy technique that visually creates a feeling of distance. The tree line also travels over here to the left, even though it is mostly blocked by the middle ground and foreground trees. But you shouldn't forget about it, like I've done before. Alright, so I think we are good on the hatching for now. What we can do next is adjust our line weight. This is basically just going back and retracing some of our lines and making them darker. It's another reason why it's good to just draw lightly in the beginning, because it allows us to choose later which lines we want to be darker. Kind of like what I was saying before about not drawing Pillow's Peak too dark because it's so far away. Now we can go back over the lines that are closer to us and make them darker. You can also use darker lines to draw attention to things that are really important, so it's handy in that way too. Be sure to catch the little details in the foreground and make them darker too, like the floaters in the grass. Those small things are easy to lose track of if we don't call attention to them. So yeah, just keep adjusting the line weight based on how you feel. You can trust your instincts on this. Speaking of instincts, it feels like something's missing. There's so much that the fantasy realm has to offer, and we have a little bit of space in the middle ground that we can play with. Let's do something. I think a creek would be nice. Whenever we come across one in the fantasy realm, Logan always has to stop and skip a rock. Like every time, without fail. I'm not a big fan of skipping rocks myself, but a creek can also be a nice way to show distance. As it travels to the background, we can make it skinnier because things that are farther from us look smaller. Oh, and we should add some mushrooms. They are all over the fantasy realm. They're usually purple with blue or white polka dots on the, is there even a word for the top of a mushroom? I'll have to ask Mr. Oz. But anyways, you know what I mean. Since we're drawing this in black and white, we can just shade in these polka dots instead of making them their true colors. Now there are mushrooms and also mushroom dream creatures. They're both basically the same size, except one runs around and is really cute while the other is an actual mushroom. Izzy and I went to one of their villages once. We ended up saving Cooper from a Grim Keeper there. We can add some detail to the creek itself by maybe adding a rock that is sticking out of the water and drawing the current moving around it. In fact, we might as well add in the current to the entire creek while we're at it. But going back to the Mushroom Dream Creature Village, maybe don't bring that up when talking to Izzy either. That was when the Night Hunter captured Mr. Sharkyjaw. She took it really hard. The Night Hunter is just so cruel. I don't think anyone is born mean, but it's so hard for me to imagine that he could have ever been anything other than evil. I just can't wrap my mind around it. I guess there's always a choice to either do the right thing or the wrong thing. And if doing the wrong thing means I'll end up being like the Night Hunter, then you can bet that's not the decision I'll be making. Anyways, back to drawing. Sorry, I got a little off track there. What I'm doing now is adding in some grass and defining the edge of the creek a little better. I'm not really doing it here, but if you wanted to, you could draw the grass really long and make it arch into the water. I've seen that a couple of times, and it's a cool look. Aesthetic. Yeah, let's use the big cool art terms. Aesthetic. We're basically done now. You can keep adding as much detail as you want. Maybe some more mushrooms or grass. You can toss in another floating tree if you're not too tired of drawing those yet. Just keep going until you feel like you've done enough. And then do the hardest thing of all. Stop. Sometimes it's hard to put the pencil down because there's always some small detail to fix. But over time, it gets easier to just be content with your work and appreciate it for what it is. And hey, if there are any mistakes, you can just keep them in the back of your head for the next time you sit down to draw. You'll only get better. Well, I hope you liked that, or at least felt just a little inspired to try it out yourself. Izzy has told me to say this. Your art doesn't need to be perfect, just as long as you have fun doing it and you like it yourself. Join me in another video for another drawing. There, Izzy! I did it! Are you happy now?